What is good, everybody? Rob Stats Guerrera here with you with a very special guest from NFL Films, senior producer for NFL Films. If I have this right, 12 Emmy Awards for you, Mr. Paul Camarata?
Correct. That's right. Thanks, Rob.
Can I ask, we're going to get into the Joe Montana episode of NFL icons and all that stuff, but do you have a wall somewhere in your house that's just Emmy Awards?
Well, the first one is at my parents' house. It was very important that one go there. And so that one is up in upstate New York and Albany, where I grew up. And the rest of them are down here in New Jersey. But thank you for asking and for your care and concern after them.
So full disclosure, I worked at NBC Sports for 7 years. I worked at ESPN for 7 years. But I didn't know when you win the Emmy Award, you have to buy the statue. I was not aware of that. At least at NBC, if you won an Emmy, you had to pay for the statue. And you got 12 of those things, and they aren't cheap.
Well, I don't know about anywhere else, but here we did not have to. We were given them. I don't know if that's a secret, but so I guess that made them maybe even a little more sweet.
Yes, absolutely. Because they were like way more expensive than I thought. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're here because the Joe Montana episode of NFL Icons comes out tomorrow, Friday, January 31st on the MGM Plus app and MGM Plus. I watched it. It is fantastic. And I want to ask you, as someone who has been a 49ers fan for 40 years, who has heard all the Joe Montana stories, how did you find stuff that I have never heard before?
So one of the great joys and things that excites us about Icons is it really does lean into our archives. Our partners at MGM don't just love great storytelling. They don't just love great football storytelling, but they love the capture of history that's been happening in NFL films for over 50 years. And so they really inspire and encourage us to dig into those archives and make them the backbone. Sometimes different shows are different, right? You'll use an old shot or an old interview bite as sort of garnish, but we really get to use them as the nuts and bolts of these shows. So to your point, we dig through every interview. We go through original cameras. We go through original B-roll shoots or behind-the-scenes shoots, and we're always looking for things that we've never had the opportunity to use with a deeper dive on a subject. So yeah, even with someone like Joe, who's been in so many big games, who's played, I think it's 23 playoff games, if I'm not mistaken, more than a full season plus just in the postseason, we're able to pull out things to show. Really what we show is these guys growing up on screen. Because if you go back to some of their first interviews with NFL Films when they first came in the league, and then again, a guy like Joe who plays for 10, 15 years, you get to see them age, you get to see their hair change, their face change, their voice change. And it's really one of the things that we love about this series is how there's new capture, there's new interviews, as long as the subject is still with us, but we really get to go back in the time machine to see where they've been and how they've gotten here.
Yeah, that was one of the things I kind of liked. Obviously, he's telling the story of the catch, which Joe Montana, by this point, has told many, many times before. And I like the way that you didn't run from that. You actually showed multiple clips of him talking about the same part of the catch at different points in time. I thought that was really just a creative way to sort of tell that story in a new way for someone that has heard it many, many times. I thought that was fantastic. The other thing that struck me is, it's different when it's Joe Montana, right? If you're doing someone that played recently, that's one thing. But Joe Montana now, as the years have gone by, I feel like we hear less and less about Joe, and all we ever hear is 4 Super Bowls, which of course is amazing, but you lose so much of what made Joe Montana Joe Montana. Did you feel kind of like a sense of responsibility, like we have to sort of remind people and keep this kind of story alive of the kind of player that he was?
I think, yeah, for sure. The remind is the right word. And the other word really is illuminate. We've been doing a guy like Joe, there's younger football fans, and I had to grow up in the business to even realize this would become a thing, right? There are folks who never even heard of you. If you're a 22-year-old football fan or younger, how much do you know about Joe Montana? And you've had the pleasure of watching Tom Brady. Well, this is Tom Brady before Tom Brady. In fact, it's the guy Tom Brady looked up to. So it's like any study of history. You want to remind people who lived it, and maybe they lived it in an emotional fan way, and now they see it with different perspective as an older fan. You want to bring it to light for people who have never seen it, who don't know who he is, who don't know what he did, who don't know why he's important. And I think it's you want to add fresh perspective too. So even like that catch story you mentioned, sometimes those stories, the subjects, they tell it, like you said, verbatim over the decades, because it's burned so brightly in their mind that they literally use the same words no matter how many times they're asked about it. And other times, just as all of us, their viewpoint changes as they get older. So sometimes it's interesting to revisit those things to see, does he see it the same way? How does he feel about it now versus how he felt about it when it first happened? And again, going back to those elements, you might see how he literally reacted to it in the post-game press conference or post-game locker room. And now here he is 45 years later, with the perspective of an age of wisdom and all those things. And he might have a totally new layer that he adds to it. So that's why I think it's always worthwhile. Some people say, well, you're sort of telling the same story over and over again. I mean, when you're Joe Montana, I mean, you create a series like this to tell a story like his. It's really bedrock for this type of storytelling and for these type of series. And as historians and somewhat as teachers, I'm not a teacher, but I think we do teach future football fans and current football fans about these great figures and these great moments from the past through shows like this.
Yes, and NFL Films is the keeper of the NFL story, and it is. We're so lucky that you guys are doing the work that you're doing. How long did you sit with Joe Montana for this thing?
We were with him for about 90 minutes, I think, from for the entire interview. And that's another thing about Icons. Like, it's an hour show. Like I talked about, we want to lean into what we have. So it's not the type of show where we're going to sit with a guy for 6, 8, 10 hours like some documentaries do. We want to hit on all the things, the new material, the revisiting on the classic things. Obviously want to elevate it visually and cinematically with these locations and kind of bringing them to add the gravitas to, what makes them icons. That's part of the show as well. But the new interview is really to kind of refresh, revisit, and renew some of the older stories, always knowing we're going to lean really heavily into that material from, again, literally decades in the case of someone like Joe.
One of the things that I really liked about the episode was, you do an incredible job of, hey, look at Joe Montana. He had this incredible comeback from the time he was at Notre Dame, and he's got the Super Bowls with the 49ers, and he's, everyone's panicking, and he's super calm. Like, you have the Joe Montana mythology juxtaposed with some really human moments from Joe Montana. The fact that he had absolutely no game whatsoever when he was asking out his future wife on a date. Like, I really like the balance between Joe Montana, the quote unquote God, so to speak, and then Joe Montana, the regular guy.
Yeah. And you wonder, like, is it something about his calmness? He's just, it's funny. We talk about the unfazed in terms of, how the bodies are flying around him during the game, but he's really, and even dealing with him, he was really wonderful to work with, pleasant, warm, told great stories, had great energy. And when you revisit and you see that's just sort of his personality. And so to see the human side of him, whether it's the John Candy story, whether it's the story of how he met his wife, even the chicken soup story, and going back to Notre Dame, there's always just this, whether it's funny chaos or sort of athletic chaos or whatever it is, there's something about the way he's wired clearly that just keeps things moving, keeps things calm, and ultimately I think is really fundamental in what led to all of his success.
We actually have a clip of the John Candy story, which we're very grateful to MGM Plus for providing. So just here's a little snippet of what we're talking about.
TV timeouts in the Super Bowl are forever, it feels like, especially when you get late in the game and you're behind.
I was always an intense guy. I'm in the huddle, and I am just, man, we should be beating this team. We're behind by 3. We need to score a touchdown. This is crap. What are we doing?
Harris Barton was I call him a people person, because during the week of the Super Bowl, Harris was like a little kid, just could not wait to tell you what celebrity he saw that night. Harris is pretty anal.
I'm yelling and screaming, and Joe looks at me and he goes, hey H.
I said, hey H, man, there's John Candy on the sideline.
And I'm like, yeah, that is John Candy, look at that. The calmness that he had in such a dire moment and such an epic moment. And then the official blows the whistle and the play starts.
The 49ers trail by 3 points now with 3:10 remaining. Montana trying to drive him the length of the field here. Krager's to the 16. Montana throws, sidelines, Rice, 30-yard line.
NFL Icons. Watch now. Only on MGM Plus.
Thank you again to MGM Plus for that clip. So for people that are watching this maybe for the first time, what is it exactly that you wanted them to come away from not only the Joe Montana episode, but all of the NFL Icons episodes with?
Yeah, I think it's again, this human side of these football players. You know, we have a little bit more runway than some, well, definitely more than a short feature would, even more than some other docs do. So to be able to go kind of we say an inch wide and a mile deep on some of these subjects, really get into the nuances of it, where they came from, you know, their struggles, things that weren't always going well. Again, we live so much in the postseason career of Montana, which is, you know, by and large, almost completely successful. Of course, there's some losses in there, but, you know, just an iconic, just postseason career. But to see what he was like as a person, to see him laugh, to see the things that he was found difficult at different points in his life, I think that helps. That's what makes these stories universal. You know, a non-football fan can watch a show like this and really take things away from it and say, you know, these guys have a lot of the same struggles that all folks have. And they have to get through that in their profession, just the way all of us do in our professions, or in their families, or in their, you know, physical injuries, all those things. Like, you know, we see the glamour and the glitz, and that part's easy. It's obviously playoff week, and it's going to be Super Bowl coming up here, and all that stuff is the fun of it. But at the end of the day, these are just humans, and they're just trying to, you know, achieve and do great things. They have a very visible platform in which they do it, but the basics of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to get there and the struggles that they get through, I think, are applicable to everyone. And then, just like we said, from a filmmaking standpoint, I think we have fun making it, and we hear great feedback that the fun of folks being able to see these people come to life and, like I said, grow up on screen. You know, they come in front of the cameras. Now it's even earlier, of course, but 18, 19, 20, 22-year-old. I mean, really, right? Like young people, kids, if you want to call them that. And, you know, we interviewed Joe. He's a little bit older now. And, you know, you see the age and the experience. It's almost like we've been making this Joe Montana film for 50 years. It just happens to be coming out this Friday.
Well, if you're a Niner fan, obviously you're bummed because your team's not in the Super Bowl. You need a little bit of, you know, an uplift. Please check out the Joe Montana episode of NFL Icons. It comes out Friday, January 31st on the MGM Plus app, on MGM Plus. We could all use a little bit of a boost, and it will definitely give you that. Paul Camarata from NFL Films, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Rob. Real pleasure. Appreciate the time.